Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study Series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We have finally made our way after months.
Right, 12 weeks.
Right, 12 weeks.
The 13th week.
We have made it all the way to the end of the book of Genesis.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
There's been a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah. 2,500 years worth of stuff.
2,500 years.
All right, so last week we talked about Jacob. Jacob sends the boys, right, all of his boys back to Egypt to buy more food, right? Because there's a whole famine going on, and he hates it, but he lets Benjamin go too.
That was tough. I can't imagine how tough that would be for a 130-year-old man to watch his youngest son off into the sunset.
That he has that bad feeling of too.
Yeah. Well, he already lost Joseph. Yep.
All right, so they appear before Joseph again, and he tests them, and through it all, he can see the honesty of the brothers, right? And it gets to his heart, and the love that they have for their father. So he reintroduces himself as his brother. They, of course, are astonished, and then he asks them to bring the family back to Egypt for safekeeping during the famine.
Because there's still 5 years left in the famine, and he says it's only getting worse.
Right. And this is the second time they've come for food so far, so it's not going to get better.
Yeah.
So Pharaoh hears of the plans, which could be a bad thing. It's kind of a little cliffhanger there, but he sends wagons and provisions. So he's all in for it. Yeah. In the end, the family, really because Jacob says so, decides to go to Egypt.
Yeah.
I want to see my son before I die.
Yeah.
Chapter 46 then, to the end, Pharaoh says, hey, just come. We'll provide everything. Jacob begins his journey with rounding up everything he can and bringing it, right? Yeah. He's bringing all that he has, which you don't blame him at all.
Yeah, he's doing a full move down there.
Yeah. So God had told Jacob, don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. I will make you a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will certainly bring you back. Foreshadowing now because we know what's going to happen.
So this is the second time, going all the way back to chapter 28, when Jacob sees the vision of the stairway to heaven, right?
Right.
So God said, leave the land, I will bring you back here.
Right.
So now here we are, many years later,
right.
And God says, go ahead and leave, which, if you remember from a long time ago in chapter 14,
with Abraham,
12,
right?
and Abraham, yeah.
You're not leaving.
Yeah, you shouldn't go down to Egypt
right.
In chapter 12, but here, go to Egypt, I'll be with you. And
I'll bring you back.
And I'll bring you back, which is the second time he's told Jacob that. And this finally begins to fulfill what God told Abraham in chapter 15. Your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, but I will bring them back.
Yeah, nice.
So it's coming full circle,
right?
As we finish Genesis.
And it's always cool when, we know God is omniscient, we know all that, but to kind of see it and see it play out is cool.
Yep.
All right, so once in Egypt, including Joseph and his family, everybody, there was a family of 70 people at this point. And it's kind of a good marker there. And Joseph tells his family, hey, we're going to have to go talk to Pharaoh. And when we're in front of him, make sure, to tell him that we were shepherds, just kind of leave out the whole sheep part. And apparently Egyptians find taking care of sheep is disgusting.
Yeah.
And then they're going to end up settling in a land called Goshen there, which is kind of cool. Kind of cool from South Bend too. There's a Goshen that's not too far away. Yeah. So when they're in front of Pharaoh, Joseph brings 5 of his brothers. And my first question is, which ones? And we don't find out. The brothers don't lie at all, but they only said, your servants take care of flocks just as our ancestors did. And then, we were requesting temporary residence in the land of Goshen. Yeah. Jacob gets to meet Pharaoh, too. I mean, there's no way he would have ever thought he was going to meet Pharaoh in his life. And he told the Pharaoh that he was 130 years old. Now, you've been doing markers, right, all along.
Yep.
Is this another one?
This is another marker because we know how old Joseph was 30 years old when he was promoted to Prime Minister, Grand Vizier. It's been 7 years of plenty. Now it's been 2 years of famine. So all of the dates are lining up. He's 39 years old. Jacob is 130 years old. So all of these things that we've been talking about now for several weeks, all of the dates are lining up exactly as we expect that they should if we just do the mathematics.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Yep.
All right, so the famine, as you said, it's severe. The land of Egypt, land of Canaan, is just wasting away. And Joseph is now opening up his granaries, or has opened up his granaries,
Yeah.
and he is selling this grain, and he is making an incredible amount of money off of this. And now there's no more money left, right? So what does he do? So now he's exchanging grain for livestock. What else you have?
Yep.
So in the next year, all the money was gone, all the livestock was gone, and Egypt and beyond, there was nothing left there. So all the people had left was land.
Yep.
And themselves.
Yep.
So people started selling their land and themselves as slave for food.
Yeah.
Just to live.
Yep.
Joseph buys up all the land for Pharaoh and buys up all the people as slaves.
Yep.
Except for the priests. The priests had a food allotment that Pharaoh was already giving them, so they were okay.
Because they're still a religious country.
Right.
So, fun fact here, okay?
Yep.
If you just set the Bible aside and you don't know anything of this story, and all you know is secular world history, what you find in Egyptian history is that somehow Pharaoh went from being just the king of Egypt to actually owning Egypt, where literally the crown owned the land of Egypt. History doesn't tell us
Keep going,
how
sorry.
that happened. It doesn't give us the details, but somehow there was a shift where Pharaoh was able to buy up the land and the crown owned the land.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you how that happened.
Is there anywhere in history, is there any documentation that tells us how we get to
Pretty
this
cool
point?
though, right? I mean, but you can see it happening, right? Just walking through this.
Yep.
So now Joseph is actually providing the seed for the people to plant for their harvest.
Yep.
And Pharaoh gets a fifth.
Yeah,
Right? Pharaoh
yeah.
gets 20% of it.
Because for 7 years he was collecting all this stuff, and now he's selling it back to the people who paid it in a tax. I mean, this is government at work.
Right.
We're going to tax you, and then we're going to sell it to you, and then we're going to tax you again.
Yeah.
You would think
That is the only problem, right? Now that he owns everything, he doesn't have a tax base anymore.
Right.
But he does because they're sharecropping on there, and he's getting a fifth in there.
Yep. I mean, he was born to be a politician, apparently.
All right, so the nation of Israel, which is 70 people, not quite a nation yet, they settled in Egypt. They were fruitful, they increased in numbers, and Jacob lived another 17 years in Egypt.
Yep.
Then he called Joseph, and he made him pledge to be buried in Canaan, right, where he came from, the land of his fathers. And at the end of this chapter, Jacob bows down to the head of his bed while Joseph is in the room. Mm-hmm. There's some question, is this significant, or is it just...
It could just be an old guy sort of leaning over on his staff. One commentator makes the note that when we get to the book of Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews translates or uses the Greek version of the word that means worship. So maybe he was leaning on his staff and worshiping or praying, or maybe at 147 years old, he's just resting there taking a nap.
Right.
So
Joseph brings his two sons to visit Jacob, and that's Manasseh and Ephraim. Mm-hmm. And they're going to get a blessing. So all this is kind of predetermined. And before that, they are introduced to Jacob, even though Jacob knows exactly who he is. But it's kind of a
sort of the formal
occasion there.
And who is,
Yeah, and that's exactly what he says. But Jacob retells about the covenant that God, right? We're going back into the history. He's recapping everything. And then Jacob says that he's adopting the two boys as his sons.
Yeah.
And this is big.
Yeah.
This is a big thing here.
Yeah.
And that means that those sons are going to get a share of inheritance.
Yep.
And then Jacob also says, look, doesn't matter how many other sons you have, we're only talking about these two. These two are the only one.
Yeah, and that's really an important thing, because so if you think about it, Jacob had 12 sons. So in the process of the birthright, whoever has the birthright automatically gets double of whatever anybody else. So 12 gets divided, everything gets divided 13 ways, and then the birthright holder gets 2 of those, and then the other 11.
Everybody else gets a 12.
Joseph died as far as Jacob is concerned. So now he has only 11 sons. He adopts 2 more. So now he has 13. Everything gets divided 13 ways, and Joseph's family gets 2 of those, effectively giving him the double portion of the birthright.
So Judah wouldn't get that
So
birthright?
Judah didn't get the birthright.
Okay.
Judah didn't get it as the inheritance, but
Right.
Judah, and this is one of those things that when if you go all the way back to chapter 27, where Isaac was giving the birthright to Esau or Jacob or whatever, and he didn't give the spiritual blessing. He was talking about was the stuff. Jacob actually gets it right. Judah carries the spiritual blessing,
Okay.
but Joseph's 2 sons
Right.
get the stuff.
Yeah.
So Joseph in most of the lists is not ever named.
Well, that's what I was going to bring up,
Yeah.
because then when you get into Exodus and start reading, and they're assigning land, where'd Joseph go?
No.
Who are these 2 new guys?
So you've got Ephraim and you've got Manasseh, and Ephraim really becomes the tribe of Joseph. So like Revelation 7, there are 12 tribes listed there. Dan's left out, but you have Joseph and Manasseh. Ephraim's left out, but you have Joseph. So those 2 almost become synonymous in some areas. And Ephraim becomes the tribe where the capital of the northern kingdom, when the kingdom splits, Ephraim is really that big tribe. So even Joseph's family really carries on a major role
part.
throughout, even though his name is almost never mentioned again. These 2 are.
So Jacob is getting ready to bless the 2 boys. Joseph positions them so Manasseh is closest to his right hand, and Ephraim to his left hand. And Jacob blesses them, and as we've seen before, there's a cross-hand blessing.
Yeah.
And Joseph tries to stop him, and Jacob's like, "Nope, I know what I'm doing here."
Yep.
So the blessing should have been to, let's see,
Manasseh,
but instead went to Ephraim.
which is why then we see that as
Playing
that
out.
what I'm talking about as far
Yeah.
as being Joseph and
Yeah.
the larger tribe.
Now Jacob did say that Manasseh would be great, would found a nation, but
Yeah.
Ephraim would be greater, and
Yeah.
the descendants would be a multitude of nations.
Yeah, and it's exactly what happened.
Yep. Okay. All right. So Jacob then calls all of his sons in, right? He's towards the end of his life, and he really gives a synopsis of each one and looking into the future, what's going to happen.
And a lot of this just came from their character traits.
Right.
My dad has always loved this chapter because he looks forward to the day when he gets old and can sit down in front of us and yell at us.
That's basically what it is. Right. Thought you forgot about that, Dad. And then one of these, right? Yeah, I wasn't going to go through every one of these, but I was going to go through at least the first 3 or 4, because Reuben was the first one, right? And it's how did he lose that blessing?
Right.
And if you remember, he slept with Jacob's concubine.
Yeah.
Jacob didn't forget that,
Like,
and
this
there was
was
even a
almost
note.
100
There was
years
even a
ago.
note in there that said, "And Jacob knew."
And he knew. Yeah, this is like 70 years ago that Jacob has been holding on. You still don't get the birthright.
Right. So then it should go to Simeon or Levi, right?
Yep.
But if you remember, they had a little problem with the sister. Well, they were defending their sister's honor, and they wiped out a town.
Yeah.
So they're kind of
Yep.
off
Jacob's
the
like,
list too.
you ruined my reputation, so he's not going to forget that.
Right. So then it goes to Judah. But since the 3 older brothers were disqualified, Judah's there, and he calls Judah the lion cub.
Yeah.
And the others will bow down to you.
Yep.
We've heard that before with Joseph.
Yep.
But this will be in the future. And also the scepter will not depart from Judah until he comes to whom it belongs.
Yeah.
And the nations will obey him. Those we got to take as the future of the Messiah coming with Jesus.
Yeah.
in there.
So Jesus is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So and Judah is called a lion's cub here.
Right. So
And then the scepter, the ruler is coming from Judah. And absolutely, that's messianic right there,
Right.
verses 9 to 10.
Well, and also remember that Judah's the one that said, let's sell Joseph into slavery.
Yeah.
So he went from having a lot of guilt to being reconciled to where he was today.
Yeah, we're not sure if Jacob ever found out about that.
Yeah, it's a need to know basis. And, yeah. So he goes through each son with a blessing, and you're going to be able to read it for
blessing.
yourself
Blessing is pretty generous with some of these guys.
He called it a blessing, so I'm calling it a blessing. Jacob finishes and again has to be buried in Canaan in the cave that his grandfather bought, right? Great grandfather, Abraham bought,
Yeah.
and Jacob dies. I'm sure not right at that point, but dies soon after that.
Yeah.
So chapter 50, Jacob was embalmed. We got to remember we're in Egypt.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
He's embalmed.
He's embalmed, maybe mummified too.
Yeah.
Depending on the.
Yeah, how far it went. But Egypt mourned him for 70 days.
70 days to mourn the
Father of a
foreign
second
father.
Right.
Don't forget, this is not even
Right.
Egyptian, but all Egypt mourned for 70 days.
Right. Well, it gets better. Joseph asks Pharaoh, "Hey, I need some time off to go bury my father." It was a promise. Pharaoh said, "Okay," and it says all the officials went with him. Now, I'm sure not all went, but a sizable amount went with him.
Huge.
Said all
caravan.
of Joseph's household, but they left the little children. The sons carried Jacob to Canaan and buried him in the same cave that Abraham had purchased.
Yep.
Can you imagine half of Egypt showing up?
Well, and
Hey, we're here.
And that's verse 11. When the Canaanites who lived in the land saw them mourning at the threshing floor of Atah, they said, "This is a very sad occasion for the Egyptians."
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yeah, they would not have remembered, right? I mean, the people of the area.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jacob is now buried, and the brothers are saying to themselves, with Dad gone, he could easily turn on us. So they lied to Joseph and said, "Hey, Dad told us you need to forgive us." And Joseph cried. The brothers threw themselves on the ground. Joseph saw right through it. Yeah. And, I take it he was crying because you don't believe in me yet? You don't believe I'm I'm your brother?
They've been in Egypt now for 17 years-ish, right? 17, maybe 18 by now, the whole thing.
I could have not invited him.
And, it says that Joseph wept. It was like, that's really what you think about me? Right. That's really what you think of me? That's the character that you think that I have? Yeah. Is that I've been holding this grudge, not just for the time that I've been here.
Right.
Because he's been there for almost 40 years at this point. Yeah. And that's what you think of me?
So Joseph again said, "Look, you guys did mean to harm me, but God turned this around and he put it to good use and it saved all of us. Don't be afraid. I'm going to provide for you."
Yeah.
Joseph lived to 110, saw his great-grandsons, and then he said that God, towards the end, he said, remember, God will surely lead you from this land, from Egypt, and when that happens, take my bones.
Yeah.
That's kind of a cool thing. And then he was buried in Egypt.
Yeah.
And that leads us to the end of Genesis.
Yeah.
Right? So, how do you recap 13 weeks? You don't, but we're talking 2,500 years. We went through God creating the world, and then we followed Abraham and his son and his grandson and all the way down. Mm-hmm. And now we're to the point where there's about 70 people in Egypt, and we know it's going to be a lot more than that, where God put them to keep them safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
a lot of promises in here, a lot of God's actions and work, creation.
Yeah, I hate calling it a story because it almost seems to minimize it. But this is an epic. This is a drama that played out, like you said, over 2.5 millennia.
Right.
And these are real people and their lives, and we tried to bring a lot of that humanity out, and we don't always do a good job with that. But these were real people and real lives, and we just went through 17 years, and then
we're just skipping. Joseph lived to be 110.
All of a sudden he's 110, and he's dying.
Was he 39 last we checked?
It's been
right. Yeah, but it's great for us from a historical standpoint to understand where Judaism came from, and then also where Christianity is coming from too.
Yeah, and being able to overlap this with secular world history and see where we have information that they won't always necessarily acknowledge, You know, so
yeah, cool.
it's good stuff. Well, we hope that you've enjoyed this little trip through the first book of the Bible. Really, really important book. Genesis means beginning, and we have seen the beginnings of a lot of things, including the nation of Israel, which when we get to Exodus, we'll be able to continue that story. So hopefully you'll stick around and find out what else we do. Find our other videos here on our channels, and as you have comments and questions, please make sure that you submit those. We will see you back here with a brand new book next time.
Bye, everybody.